Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of The Great Ruler Season 2 Part 22 based on novel. So let's start. When Mu Chen closed his eyes again, everyone was instantly shocked. Even Shen Sungsheng and Li Xiantong violently contracted their eyes. From the looks of it, Mu Chen didn't exhaust all of his abilities yet. He still had some hidden methods. At this time, Mu Chen, obviously, would not continue to arrange a spiritual array, as his speed was too slow. Furthermore, Jiyu Qianyang would not give him a second opportunity to do so. Therefore, he needed to utilize other methods. However, what methods would truly allow him, whose strength was at the heavenly transformation stage initial phase, to contend against Jiyu Qianyang? Nobody knew. Therefore, they could only lock their eyes tightly onto Mu Chen in the sky. At this moment, Jiyu Qianyang's forehead had faintly wrinkled. Although he did not assume that Mu Chen was just putting up an act, after experiencing the rank 5 spiritual arrays earlier, he would not see the latter as an ordinary freshman again. However, as to exactly what method Mu Chen would use to contend against him, he appeared slightly curious. After all, common methods would definitely not be able to let a person of heavenly transformation stage initial phase to contend with an opponent of heavenly completion stage initial phase. In the air, Mu Chen, whose eyes were tightly shut, did not make everyone wait for long. Lightning was faintly discernible around his body as it started to appear, while his skin started to turn a silvery color, bit by bit. The peals of thunder quietly rang out. Is that the lightning god physique? Upon seeing this, a trace of disappointment and doubt flashed past the eyes of Shen Sungsheng and Li Xiantong. They had also practiced the lightning god physique before. Although it was capable of increasing one's combat prowess by quite a bit, it was far from being able to substitute the disparity of Mu Chen from Jiyu Qianyang. If Mu Chen tried to use this to contend against Jiyu Qianyang, the result was already clearly evident. In the sky, Mu Chen's eyes slowly opened as lightning sparkled within them. Lightning arcs danced and jumped around his body as a destructive power was faintly discernible as it radiated out. His strength has grown. Jiyu Qianyang's eyes faintly narrowed as disappointment flashed within them as he thought, this is far from enough. The ones who felt this wasn't only them. Even the participating students in the surroundings of the spiritual light mountain faintly wrinkled their foreheads as some worry surfaced within their eyes. Although Mu Chen's aura had grown stronger, it was clearly far from being able to contend with Jiyu Qianyang. However, facing those gazes that blotted the sky, Mu Chen did not care to bother much about them, with his gaze only having Jiyu Qianyang present within. In the next instant, he took a step forward. With his body transforming into a bolt of lightning, he shot forward. Jiyu Qianyang did not have the slightest trace of movement as he looked at Mu Chen, who was hurtling over akin to a bolt of lightning. Gently shaking his head, he thought, is Mu Chen trying to shatter the broken jar? However, for him to just rush over like this. Giving a helpless smile, he did not continue to think about it. With a twist of his palm, scarlet-red spiritual energy rose out, akin to dancing flames, as boundless fluctuations started to radiate out. Mu Chen's speed was exceedingly quick. Within a number of breaths, he had seemingly appeared before Jiyu Qianyang. Without the slightest trace of hesitation, he immediately sent a fist rumbling out. Spiritual energy burning with black flames gushed out while bringing along strong fluctuations. This caused even the ground to crack under the force of his full-force attack. The violent fist of winds caused Jiyu Qianyang's hair to shock and flutter. However, the latter only shook his head gently. Clenching his finger tightly, in the next instant, Jiyu Qianyang similarly sent a fist rumbling out. Looking at the fists that were about to smash together in a moment, a low sigh rang out in the hearts of everyone watching. There were even some people who had turned their heads away. In such a head-on confrontation, Mu Chen simply didn't have the slightest chance of victory. Wang Tong and the rest laughed bitterly, before shaking their heads and sighing. Su Ling's lovable face turned pale at the moment. Only Luo Li, standing beside her, still had clear eyes while tightly staring at Mu Chen, because she knew him too well. Regardless of how difficult the situation was, he would never do an action that was absolutely pointless. Under the unblinking gazes of countless people, Mu Chen's and Jiu Qinyan's fists were about to collide. However, just at this instant, the other hand of Mu Chen quickly formed a mysterious symbol. Following the completion of that symbol, astonishing sounds of lightning furiously rang out from within his body. In the meridians of a part of his body, an uneven black lightning bead furiously exploded at this instant. Bang! At the instant when the black lightning bead exploded, an indescribably terrifying force gushed out from within, akin to a flood. Black-colored lightning liquid overflowed, circulating erratically along his meridians. Intense pain spread out from within Mu Chen's body, causing his eyes to turn bloodshot as the capillaries in his eyes bulged out. Despite this, he firmly resisted the pain and hurriedly displayed the lightning god physique, frantically absorbing the terrifying power of lightning. Bang! At this same instant, the fists of Mu Chen and Jiu Qinyang violently collided into each other. Black-colored lightning suddenly gushed out from every pore of Mu Chen's body, while a faint bloody mist was even discernible. Boom! An astonishingly loud sound that shook the heavens and earth rang out and resonated across this stretch of the world. A violent tremor seemingly ran through the giant peak that seemed to prop the sky up, while everyone could see that the earth there had collapsed, as giant cracks endlessly extended from there like black pythons. Waves of shattered rock shot out from the origin of impact, hiding the skies and covering the earth as they shot out in all directions, before transforming into fragments that blotted the skies with a bang. Everyone opened their eyes wide as they stared at the place where shattered rocks continued to shoot out. The place was enveloped by the dazzling rays of erratic spiritual energy, causing people to be unable to exactly see what had happened within. Shen Sangsheng, Li Xiantong, as well as Lin Jing and Zhu Qingshan, locked their gazes there with graveness showing in their eyes. At the instant when their gazes had locked onto the origin of impact, the pupils of the four violently contracted as an erratic roar of thunder furiously resounded. In the next instant, a shadow had, unexpectedly, shot out from the place of dazzling radiance. The 2 feet of the figure dug into the ground, creating 2-foot holes in the hard stone surface, before dragging back, forming 2 eye-piercing marks approximately 100 meters long. Scorched marks were presented on the rocks along the sides of those marks. As a tremble shook through his arms, the long flaming spear transformed into a fiery streak of light. Shattering space, while carrying along violent and explosive fluctuations, it fiercely shot towards Mu Chen. Facing the berserking fiery long spear flying explosively towards him, Mu Chen did not show any sign of wanting to give way to it. Clenching his hand tightly to form a fist, the black lightning liquid enveloped his fist, which he violently sent rumbling towards the fiery long spear. Bang! As they violently collided, the fiery spear, which was capable of piercing through an expert at the heavenly transformation stage late phase, was directly sent shooting away by Mu Chen's fist, before transforming in fluttering scarlet-red bits that blotted the sky. In the next moment, Mu Chen's figure traveled through the plume that was created. In a flash, he had already arrived right in front of Jiu Qinyang. Bang! Bang! Without the slightest courtesy and hesitation, Mu Chen's black lightning liquid-covered fists howled. Transforming into shades, they hid the skies and covered the earth as they hurtled towards Jiu Qinyang. Every single fist sent out was abnormally frightening, with even the surrounding space showing slight traces of distortion. If it was before, Jiu Qinyang might have commented on Mu Chen's stupidity for wanting to engage in close-quarter combat. After all, the difference in strength between the two of them was too large. Mu Chen could only rely on special methods to defeat him. In a head-on confrontation, the latter would lose without a doubt. However, facing the attacks that Mu Chen had launched at him now, Jiu Qinyang did not dare to show the slightest negligence. The current Mu Chen, who was enveloped in the black lightning liquid, was too terrifying. The strength radiating from the former was to such a degree that made even him feel a sliver of dread. Boundless scarlet-red spiritual energy erratically gushed out from Jiu Qinyang's body. In an instant, his arms were covered in a majestic layer of scarlet-red crystals, the embodiment of the degree of condensation of his spiritual energy. After unleashing all of the spiritual energy within his body without any restraint, Jiu Qinyang's gaze started to turn scorchingly hot, and fighting intent erupted from his eyes. Roar! A howl resounded from his throat as he too took a step forward. Sending his fists howling out, they seemed to have transformed into a boundless sea of fighting intent as they violently rumbled out. Boom! 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 Seemingly in an instant, fists of the two collided into each other. Akin to meteors striking the earth, they erupted with extremely astonishing erratic fluctuations. Everyone watching could only see the black lighting, as well as the scarlet-red spiritual energy frantically erupting about, and the figures of the two violently collided into one another. As fist shadows dissipated, everyone could see the deep and enormous holes that they created around the surrounding earth. Countless people became tongue-tied as they watched the crazily clashing figures hidden behind the erratic eruption of spiritual energy. The raw confrontation when fists smashed against flesh caused the hearts of countless people to feel fear and trepidation. No one would have guessed that this fight would be violent and ferocious to such a degree. Bang! Under the countless gazes that showed fear and trepidation, the fists of the two, whose eyes had already turned red, violently smashed against each other in the erratic eruption of spiritual energy. Shock waves visible to the naked eye swept out, and the entire stretch of the earth there instantly cracked and shattered. Bang! Rumble! Destructive black lightning seemed to flash within Mu Chen's eyes as the black lightning liquid started to squirm and wriggle on his arm, causing destructive energies to gush out from within. Bang! Once again, Mu Chen's black lightning-covered fist smashed straight against Ji Yuqian's scarlet-red crystal-covered fist. Black-colored ripples radiated out as Ji Yuqian's face instantly changed. Some cracks had, unexpectedly, started to appear on the scarlet-red crystal on his fist. The destructive fluctuations within the black lightning liquid continued to ceaselessly pervade him. Under these destructive fluctuations, the spiritual energy within Ji Yuqian's body started to rapidly get destroyed and defeated. Go back! A hoarse roar furiously rang out from Mu Chen's mouth, causing the black ripples to violently tremble. Instantly, the crystal layer on Ji Yuqian's arm completely shattered, while his body was flung back 1,000 meters by the former's fist. As Ji Yuqian was sent flying, Mu Chen's feet dug deep into the hard rock ground below him by the rebounding force, causing him to almost flip backwards. He sent Ji Yuqian flying yet again. Shocked, clamoring voices rang out once again from the surroundings of the spiritual light mountain as excitement and strong emotions surfaced within the eyes of countless students. No one would have imagined that the current Mu Chen would be frightening to the point he was actually able to send Ji Yuqian retreating in a head-on confrontation. Under the soaring atmosphere, Mu Chen pressed his hands on the ground, and pulled himself out from the earth as a bit of the black lightning liquid flowed out. Raising his head, he looked towards Ji Yuqian, who he had sent flying. At this moment, there weren't any traces left of the initial expression he had in the beginning of the fight, since blood was continuously dripping from his arms. Not only was his clothing tattered, his head of fiery red hair had turned messy and charcoal black. The energy contained by shattering that black lightning bead had far exceeded Mu Chen's expectations. This energy was too terrifying. Even with him learning the lightning god's physique, there were still some pretty serious internal injuries within his body. Thinking about it, if he didn't learn the lightning god's physique, and possessed the ability granted by it to absorb the strength of lightning to temper his fleshly body, the current him would have been completely fried by the energy of the black lightning and turned into ashes. Regardless of that, he was unable to maintain this state for too long. As of now, his current body was simply unable to endure the devastating black lightning that was wreaking havoc. I have to end this fast. Instead of succumbing to the intense pain radiating from within his body, it had caused Mu Chen to maintain his calmness at all times. Eyes sparkling, he did not allow the advantage that he seemed to have gained to flood his mind, as he firmly decided to prevent this fight from dragging on any longer. Bang! Just as this thought flashed past Mu Chen's mind, an exceedingly erratic spiritual energy fluctuation suddenly rushed to the heavens in the faraway sky. Raising his head, Mu Chen saw that the horizon present before him had already turned into a purgatory of flames. Under the burning horizon, Ji Yuqian stood erect. As of now, his eyes were scarlet red, as if flames had erupted from them. Staring tightly at Mu Chen, a hoarse sound rang throughout the horizon. Mu Chen, with your strength at the heavenly transformation stage initial phase, you're the first person that is able to force me to such a stage. Exactly who was that? Everyone's gazes instantly converged over where the figure that was shot out staggered and stumbled, before stabilizing his footing. As the radiance dissipated, bit by bit, it finally revealed a conspicuous head of scarlet-red hair. That was Jiyu Qianyang. The pupils of countless people violently expanded, with some even forgetting to breathe as thick shock and incredulous expressions crept onto their faces. How is that possible? Regardless if the surroundings were the spiritual light mountain or the northern public square, everyone was mumbling in disbelief. The person that was miserably flung out was, unexpectedly, Jiyu Qianyang. On the podium, the gazes of the elders watching the fight started to turn dignified at this moment. What's happening? The four, Shen Sangsheng, Li Xiantong, Lin Jing and Zhu Qingshan, looked in astonishment at the spectacle that made people feel incredulous. Even the four of them were slightly able to regain their clarity. Previously, the two rank 5 spiritual arrays were unable to force Jiyu Qianyang to such a miserable state. However, could this kind of head-on confrontation that should not have the slightest chance of victory lead to such a result? Under the shocked gazes that blotted the sky, Jiyu Qianyang slowly raised his head. At this moment, an obvious trace of blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth as he looked towards the direction of the giant peak with a similar shock in his eyes. From there, an erratic spiritual energy was still enveloping the place. You're truly formidable. I never imagined that you're actually still hiding an ace that's even more formidable than the two rank 5 spiritual arrays. Jiyu Qianyang's hoarse and deep voice rang out as he wiped away the blood stains at the corner of his mouth, while no longer appearing to be as relaxed as before. Within the center of the radiance where the erratic spiritual energy was still present, footsteps seemed to be ringing out as everyone's gazes tightly locked onto that area. The sounds of footsteps become increasingly heavy. Within the spiritual energy radiance, a figure became increasingly clear. In the next moment, he stepped out of the dazzling radiance and appeared before all of the gazes. When that figure appeared, everyone instantly sucking in a mouthful of cold air. The Mu Chen that had appeared before them had a huge change from his previous appearance. Shattered lines had appeared on his body as black-colored lightning liquid endlessly flowed from the pores of his body, before enveloping him within. Black-colored lightning danced across his body, while the pair of black pupils were filled with an indescribable savageness that seemed to be the flavor of destruction. If the previous Mu Chen gave people a gentle and calm feeling, the current him was akin to the creature that had crawled out of the depths to destroy the heavens and earth, causing people's hearts to palpitate. What is that? Everyone looked in shock at the changed Mu Chen. The destructive energies radiating from him, was that truly something that could be displayed by a person at the heavenly transformation stage initial phase? That's the lightning god physique, muttered Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong as their eyes were brimming with doubt. They were able to detect the familiar fluctuations from Mu Chen's body. However, this familiar lightning god physique was much stronger than the lightning god physique they knew. Within the northern public square, countless people were still in shock, while the faces of the elders at the podium turned grave and dignified. This fluctuation. The abstruse eyes of Dean Taikang faintly contracted, before saying in a soft voice, "This is the might of the divine black lightning." Unexpectedly, there's a strand of divine black lightning in that brat's body. He truly is messing around, said a white-haired elder on the side as he shook his head, before continuing, "Although I don't know where he got that divine black lightning from, it's the stuff that even people of sovereign rank would not dare to casually touch. However, that kid actually dared to keep it within his body. Ha ha, that physique cultivating deity tier spiritual art sure looks familiar." Dean Taikang gave a faint smile without saying anything else. However, the gaze that locked onto the figure of the youth in the light screen radiated with increasing interest. Looks like our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy has produced another brat with a monstrous talent. On the giant peak, under the attentive gazes of countless people, Mu Chen slowly raised his head. With black-colored lightning liquid flowing around him, he tightly stared at Jiyu Qianyang. At this moment, a hoarse voice, along with the flavor of destruction, slowly rang out. "Let's continue." As the hoarse voice rang out, Mu Chen took a step forward, with the earth seemingly vibrating at this instant. On the giant peak, destructive fluctuations gushed out from Mu Chen's body as low and deep rumbles of thunder continuously rang out from within him. As those sounds resounded, even the sky seemed to turn dark and overcast. Countless gazes converged on Mu Chen's body, which was covered in black lightning liquid that was flowing across the entire surface of his body. Due to the successive shocks and astonishment they had received from him, the faces of a large number of people started to gradually turn calm. Instead, their gazes towards Mu Chen started to turn peculiar and weird, since the latter's performance had exceeded far beyond their expectations. Of a current freshman strong to such a level, the gazes of Lin Zheng and Zhu Qingshan had also turned strange. They never imagined that a freshman, whose strength was only at the heavenly transformation stage initial phase, would actually be able to force Ji Qianyang to such a miserable state. Upon hearing that, the gazes of Shen Xiangsheng and Li Xiantong in the distance intersected for a moment. Obviously, they were also unable to understand the hidden cards that Mu Chen had now displayed. However, regardless of that, to them, this was not bad news. The fight in front of them had seemingly turned slightly towards Mu Chen's favor. Staring at Mu Chen, whose current appearance had become somewhat terrifying, Ji Qianyang's eyes turned increasingly solemn and grave. At this moment, the destructive fluctuations radiating from the former's body had made his heart start to palpitate and tremble. Strength of such a level shouldn't appear on the body of a freshman, whose strength was only at the level of a heavenly transformation stage initial phase. Taking in a deep breath, scarlet-red spiritual energy curled onto his arms, akin to raging flames. Across the horizon, boundless scarlet-red spiritual energy swept out, akin to a prairie full of heavenly fire. At this moment, he could no longer continue to show any mercy. Boom! As boundless spiritual energy gushed out of Ji Qianyang's body, Mu Chen, who was completely covered in the black lightning liquid, had already taken a step forward. Instantly, the earth trembled as peals of thunder resounded. Akin to a black bolt of lightning, Mu Chen instantly shot out. Looking at the black bolt of lightning heading his way while radiating with devastating fluctuations, Ji Qianyang's eyes instantly narrowed. With a clench of his hands, scarlet-red spiritual energy erupted out, before transforming into a long flaming spear in his hands. I admired your capabilities. In this fight today, if you're able to receive this move of mine, it'll be considered your victory. Upon shouting those words, Ji Qianyang did not show the slightest hesitation. Rapidly placing his hands together, he formed a seal. Following the seal's formation, the scarlet-red spiritual energy that blotted the horizon hid the skies and covered the earth as they rapidly converged in his hands. Bang! Bang! As the scarlet-red spiritual energy crazily converged, a scarlet-red halberd, approximately 10 meters long, was faintly discernible as it finally formed within Ji Qianyang's hands. The long halberd was akin to a twisting fiery dragon, looking exceedingly malevolent and sinister. Its entire body was scarlet-red, as if it was made entirely of scarlet-red crystals. As the fiery dragon slowly wriggled and squirmed, indescribably erratic fluctuations started to ripple and undulate. Roar! As the fiery dragon roared, the entire stretch of the world seemed to be in a fiery and scorching state. He even had to use that move. The eyes of both Lin Zheng and Zhu Qingshan contracted. Both of them had deep understanding of Ji Qianyang, and naturally had ample knowledge of his skills and abilities. The move the latter was using right now was considered the strongest attack in his arsenal. At the beginning of the fight, who would have expected that Ji Qianyang, who had victory grasped within his hands, would be forced to such a stage? Both Shen Xiangsheng and Li Xiantong had also raised their heads and stared gravely at the horizon. Anyone could tell that at this stage of the fight, both parties had already brought out all of their trump cards. In this fight today, even if Mu Chen were to lose, there would be absolutely no one that would mutter half a word of doubt. Looks like this is his final move. Following the appearance of the fiery dragon halberd, Ji Qianyang's face turned somewhat pale. As his scarlet-red eyes stared at Mu Chen, he furiously took a step forward. As a tremble shook through his arm, the long halberd erupted with scarlet-red light that blotted the skies. Great heavenly fiery dragon halberd. Roar! Within the sea of flames, a dragon roar seemed to resound as the flames that blotted the sky erupted out. Transforming into a scarlet streak of light, the fiery dragon halberd shot across the horizon, before enveloping Mu Chen within its light. Within the scarlet streak of light, the fiery dragon spread its jaws and claws open as the dragon roar shook the earth. Raising his head, Mu Chen looked at the scorching gale blowing at him, causing the earth around him to be roasted to the point of cracking and shattering. Within his black eyes, the destructive black lightning started to grow increasingly erratic. Placing his palms together, the black lightning liquid started to flow within his palms, before fiercely forming a seal with his hands. At this moment, spiritual energy erupted from his back, before transforming into a starry sky. Within the starry sky, spiritual energy that blotted the sky gushed out as a tiger and a tortoise stepped out from within, appearing simultaneously. Roar! As they roared and howled together, countless nervous and emotional gazes immediately swept over, while noticing the black lightning twisting and arching around their bodies. A dragon, a tiger, and a tortoise. Shattering the skies, under the gazes of countless people who were close to suffocating under their pent-up breaths, they furiously collided against each other. The skies turned dark and overcast, while every single gaze in the surroundings of the spiritual light mountain was focused on the air above the giant peak. There were two frightening attacks that caused everyone to shudder and tremble. They howled, before violently colliding like two comets that streaked across the skies. In that instant, an intense shock wave rang and resounded across the entire hunting grounds. The dazzlingly intense light produced was akin to a scorching sun, sending its intense rays of light that shattered the darkness of the world. Under the eye-piercing light, the eyes of countless people could not help turning narrow. Boom! As the intense sun surfaced in the sky, the dragon, tiger, and tortoise released all of the strongest energies contained within them without the slightest bit of restraint. This caused an approximate 1,000-meter wide spiritual energy storm to form, and faint traces of distortions could be faintly discernible in the surrounding space. Everyone tightly stared at the incomparably large spiritual energy storm. As the spiritual energy within it grew increasingly erratic, the storm started to distort, traces of it being unable to contain the energy within it any longer. Creak! As the distortions present within the spiritual energy storm reached its limit, before the crowd could react, it exploded, causing 1,000-meter wide spiritual energy ripples to sweep across the skies. That was a rather spectacular scene. Being at the frontmost position against the shock waves, Mu Chen and Jiu Qianyang both bore the greatest brunt of it. Although the two of them had done their utmost to defend against them, they were still sent flying the instant they made contact with them. Bang! Bang! As the bodies of the two flew out, the neighboring mountain peaks were all smashed through by them. Bang! Finally, the two of them smashed straight into the inside of the two mountain peaks. Rocks rolled down, covering and burying the both of them up. While both of them had miserable outcomes, the people close to the giant peak were akin to small fishes stuck in churning waters as each of them was sent tumbling into a pitiful state. There were some that were even more unlucky, being sent twisting in the air while spurting out blood from their mouths. However, it was fortunate that this was, after all, just the aftermath of the collision, with not much destruction being caused. After a few minutes, the devastating spiritual energy storm started to slowly get weaker, bit by bit. Only when that happened did the surrounding crowd start to regain their senses, and turn their gazes towards the giant peak. Unable to bear it, their mouths started to twitch. As of now, the lowering giant peak was in a completely ruined state, with giant cracks extending from it, akin to a spider web, covering it entirely. The collision between the two had seemingly destroyed the entire towering giant peak. This caused quite a few people to feel shock and astonishment within their hearts. The destructive power of these two people was too terrifying. What about the two of them? Someone thought about the two main characters, before hurriedly turning their gazes towards the two collapsed mountain peaks in the distance. Those students that participated in the hunt were, as of now, incomparably nervous and anxious. Mu Chen's victory or defeat concerned all of them being able to acquire the spiritual light empowerment. As of now, Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong had yet to make their move, as even they were waiting for Mu Chen to give some closure for them. As long as Mu Chen was able to finish his fight with a draw, all of the students there would basically achieve a definite victory in the combined results. However, if Mu Chen lost, they would need to win a fight amongst the last two. Furthermore, thinking about the need for them to defy the heavens to pull off a reversal, this would be an extremely difficult task to accomplish for even Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong. After all, Both Lin Jing and Zhu Qingshan, who had yet to make a move, weren't people that were easy to deal with. At this moment, the expressions on Shen Xiangsheng's and Li Xuantong's faces turned increasingly grave and solemn. Locking their sights on the two collapsed mountain peaks, even with their strong emotional control, their hearts started to beat faster. Contrary to them, Lin Jing and Zhu Qingshan remained more calm and collected. However, their tight and unwavering gazes revealed their concern for the result. The entire stretch of the world turned quiet again, while everyone awaited the result. However, the pressure coming from the surroundings was extremely fierce, causing people to be unable to catch their breath. This atmosphere was similarly present in the northern square, since everyone was staring tightly at the gigantic light screen in the sky, while tightly clenching their hands. The previous fight had admittedly caused them to feel shock, as well as sighing in admiration. However, regardless of that, the result was the most important. Crash! Boom! Under the attentive gazes of countless people, rocks started to suddenly shift and roll down from one of the collapsed mountain peaks, causing everyone's gazes to hurriedly turn over. Over there, a scarlet-red spiritual energy rushed to the skies, before a figure rushed out from within the collapsed mountain peak. "That's Jiyu Qianyang," someone exclaimed. The scarlet-red light slowly dissipated, revealing Jiyu Qianyang. As of now, his entire body was covered in blood, with his face appearing exceedingly pale. The spiritual energy surrounding his body appeared extremely weak and exhausted, without being as strong as his initial appearance. Obviously, the previously astonishing clash was not something light for Jiyu Qianyang. Upon noticing the reappearance of Jiyu Qianyang, the hearts of countless students could not help sinking. Although he had suffered serious injuries, he was still not at the stage where he was unable to continue the fight. As for Mu Chen, looking at the other collapsed mountain peak that was showing no signs of activity, their palms were all filled with sweat. This kind of silence continued for a short moment. Creak! At the other collapsed mountain peak, the rocks started to shift and roll down. Everyone's eyes turned large when they noticed a weak black ray of spiritual energy rushing out from within the layer of rocks that were pushed apart. Within the black spiritual energy, a figure stumbled and staggered as he shot through the air, before stopping a short distance away. It was Mu Chen. However, as of now, he was entirely covered in blood, with rather serious and terrible-looking wounds on his body. Compared to Jiyu Qianyang, he obviously appeared more miserable and pitiful. However, even though he had suffered such serious injuries, he still stood perfectly straight in the air. As of now, the youthful figure appeared exceedingly thin. As his tattered clothing fluttered in the wind, his miserable-looking appearance was unexpectedly unable to conceal the imposing aura that made people's hearts palpitate. Due to his injuries, the eyes of the youth had appeared dark and dim. Staring fiercely at Jiyu Qianyang in the distance, they appeared akin to a ferocious gaze of a wolf or a tiger. Countless gazes blankly stared at the youth that still stood up on the sky, covered in fresh blood. The silence continued for a long moment, before it was broken by the earth-shattering cheers. Facing Jiyu Qianyang's strongest attack, Mu Chen had managed to successfully endure it. He did not collapse. Countless students were emotional to the point that their faces were turning red as they waved their hands in the air. Their gazes looking at the thin figure in the sky were filled with admiration and worship. These kinds of gazes had already resembled those that were used when they looked at Shen Xiangsheng and Li Xiantong, and no one else. Too awesome. The faces of the three Wang brothers had also turned red, and their expressions were filled with emotions. As of now, their eyes were filled with respect. Mu Chen's performance in this fight had completely won them over. Naturally, they knew that the people being conquered would be many of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students. From this day onwards, Mu Chen's place within the academy might not be much weaker than Shen Xiangsheng and Li Xiantong. Even influential characters like Su Xian and He Yao had already been tossed far, far away by Mu Chen. Su Linga had also started to cheer, with her lovable face turning red while emotionally grabbing onto Su Xian's wrist. Previously, she had almost suffocated while watching the fight. If Mu Chen had lost in the final exchange, she would have simply lost her life. Su Xian gently nodded her small head as she looked at Mu Chen's figure with a gentle smile on her face. Who would have thought that a few months ago, this freshman was still an unknown person within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. However, now, perhaps he would become the fastest improving freshman in the history of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Contrary to everyone, Luo Li did not show the same level of emotions as the others. Staring quietly at Mu Chen, a faint upwardly curling arc appeared at the corners of her small red lips. She had always believed that the youth that she loved would be someone that became as dazzling as the stars. Regardless of before, or now, or even in the future. Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong both exhaled a quiet breath of relief as they looked at Mu Chen's figure. Unable to help it, they nodded their heads as they thought, that fellow truly makes people have a whole new level of respect for him. In the sky, Ji Chenyang had also looked with complicated emotions at the battered and exhausted youth, whose eyes were still shining exceedingly bright. Hearing the deafening sounds of cheering coming from the surroundings, he could not help letting out a bitter laugh. When he was still a student, there were a lot of people then that had cheered for him in the same manner. However, as of now, the positions were reversed. Senior brother Ji, did you have a great fight? If you feel that it's not enough, I might be able to accompany you for a move or two more. From a distance, Mu Chen slowly wiped away the bloodstains at the corners of his mouth as he spoke out, while a smile that was hard to raise appeared on his mouth. Upon hearing that, Ji Chenyang made a laugh, before slowly relaxing his body. Gesturing with his hand, he said, "It's all right. If I continue to say anything more, I'm afraid I'll invoke the anger of the crowd. Furthermore, I said earlier that if you're able to receive that move of mine, you'll be the victor of this fight." After saying those words, Ji Chenyang's gaze turned serious as he stared at Mu Chen. Cupping his hands, a low and deep voice slowly rang throughout the sky. "I've lost this fight." His actions had shown that he had already placed Mu Chen on equal grounds to himself. As of now, to him, the latter was no longer just a freshman of heavenly transformation stage initial phase. "Thanks for going easy, senior brother Ji." Without being unreasonable, Mu Chen gently nodded his head. He had risked his life for this fight. But it was all worth it. Following his words, the cheering voices in the surroundings instantly rose another notch as countless people became so emotional that their faces turned red. Mu Chen won. Mu Chen won. As countless sounds of cheering resounded, even the students at the Northern Square, who had not participated in the hunt, were feeling abnormally emotional. This fight was sufficient to make their hot blood boil. On the podium, a few elders had also faintly nodded their heads. Obviously, they felt extremely satisfied by the fight that had just occurred. "Dean, looks like our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy has another new monstrous talent." "Congratulations," said a white-haired old man sitting beside Dean Tai Kang. As of now, there was also a faint smile present on Dean Tai Kang's face as he looked at the youth in the light screen, before slowly replying, "For the sake of that, Ji Xian, Saint Spiritually Academy had not hesitated to use those underhanded moves. However, I have to tell them that our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's Mu Chen isn't any weaker than him." While deafening cheering sounds resounded around them, on the giant peaks, both Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong had smiled and laughed. In the next moment, they turned around, looking at Lin Jing and Zhu Qingshan, who had slightly complicated expressions on their faces. "Senior, the next fights should be our turn now. This video will end here.